So, welcome to today's Career Chat. I'm absolutely delighted to have Alliance partner Amey with us here today. They're going to share their transitions and their three core areas of business: facilities management, project management, and leadership and management. So sit back and enjoy. I'm going to hand you over to the Billforce chair.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. A very, very warm welcome to our speakers this morning and to our listeners. If you're catching this later on LinkedIn or Facebook, again, a warm welcome and thank you for dialing in again. So I will pass over to Phil Crick, who will introduce the Amey team and just divulge some more information about what you're going to hear this morning. Okay.
Phil, you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to do three things at once, and I should realise that that's not my skill set. Right. Good morning, everybody. My name's Phil Crick. I'm from Amey. I was formerly in the Royal Engineers, and we've now got with us today a succession of speakers, and we're going to talk to you about working within Amey. And if I can get back to the right slide view. Grief. Sorry, I am having a spectacular thing. I think I've just stopped showing my presentation as well, which was going well. I had it all queued up.
Presentation's still visible, Phil.
Is it?
Yeah, the front page is visible.
All right, for everybody apart from me. All right, I'm just going to stop it a second, and then I'm going to start it again with my apologies for being cack-handed.
Gotta love virtual tech.
Indeed.
Perfect. And then just going to present, and it's there.
Okay, brilliant. Hopefully now you can actually see that properly. What we're going to do today, we'll talk a little bit about Amey, and then just to introduce the other speakers who are going to talk about what we're going to, about the various different pieces. Pete Burnett will talk to you about facilities management as an operational manager within Amey's FM business in secure infrastructure. Pete's late infantry, and we'll talk about his career path as he, when he gets to his bit. Carl is one of our project managers working in the defence part of the business, and he's late Coldstream Guards, and we'll talk about his path and where he's got to and how to get into project management in the construction part of the business. I'll talk about some of the movement into the more senior management piece from my pathway. And then the people who you really want to talk to, Vicky Bean and Jolene Hall, who are from Amey's HR and recruiting teams, and they'll talk to you about the recruiter's perspective about where the things pass across and what we do. And then at the end, we'll be happy to take any of the questions which you may have, and hopefully that will give you some solid ways to try with facilities management. But before we do that, just to put a bit of context about Amey, I think those that oh, looks like something went wrong. Have I just dropped out?
No, Phil, you're still speaking and we can still see the presentation. Thanks. Are you okay? Can you get the presentation up? I think Phil's just frozen, that's all.
Yeah.
We'll just give him another sec.
If not, we can pass on to Pete, who's first up. But yeah, I'll give him a sec to see if he can come back.
Pete, do you want to just get ready, get your camera on, just to kick off with the FM section?
Yep, not a problem. Do you want me to share my slideshow?
Yeah, if you've got it, Pete, that's great. If not, just talk to us. Either works. Brilliant, Pete.
Perfect. Thank you, Pete.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Pete Burnett. I'm the operations manager for Amey Bradford Schools. I'll just move on and I'll tell you a bit about my journey from the army into civilian life, if you like. So my background then is I left the army in 2010. My final role within the army, I was a platoon sergeant within the Yorkshire Regiment. I deployed numerous places, Northern Ireland. I spent 3.5 years out there, Sierra Leone, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan. Afghanistan being my last deployment after 12 years service in the army. Transition experience then, on my pre-release course for my resettlement, I did fibre optic and telecommunications as part of my resettlement, obviously funded through the army, and I had to pay some money up towards that as well. Good course, travelled down to Sheffield most days to the office where we learned the basic principles of the telecommunication system, copper and fibre. Once I'd completed the course, then I was offered a 4-week work placement with the company, which was unpaid, which I didn't see a problem with because I was still getting paid by the army. So I chose to do that 4-week placement. Once I'd completed that, I was offered employment. Travelling up and down, the country, jointing fibre optic cables, copper 50 pair cabling as well. Some of the kit, I got a company van, tools, testing kit. It was all Gucci kit. The OTDR itself was worth a lot of money. So really, I fell on my feet to start with. My current employment, then I am the operations manager, as I said before, for the Amey Bradford Schools, where I've had a good journey with Amey, which I'll go on to shortly on my next couple of slides on how I did it. So 7 years with Amey, I've progressed through the ranks, if you like, and I've been in this position 12 months now, and I'm hoping to progress further within Amey. So my journey into Civvy Street then. So as I mentioned before, on completion of my pre-release course, I was offered the employment with a company called Limbrooks, based in Sheffield, which it was ideal. Company van, tools, and uniform, and it were also weekly paid. As you can imagine, being military, we were monthly paid, last working day of the month, so it was absolute heaven for me to be getting money every week in the bank. It was brilliant. As I said before, we were travelling up and down the country to install the fibre optics, which runs along the backbone of the rail infrastructure. So I also got the qualification, my PTS card, so I could access the rail. We just went in. All the civils guys did all the hard work. They pulled all the cables in, and we just jointed it every 2K. We'd end-to-end test it, do any remedials we did, and we'd set off home on a Friday. It was similar to being in the army. I was away Monday to Friday, home on a weekend, etc. Yeah, and I really enjoyed my time with Limbrooks. I worked there for a good 7 months, and then unfortunately, this is when the drama happened. I was laid off. I had put 4 months there, so it was 4 months. It was a case of last in, first out. As I was laid off, being ex-services, I'd been in the army 12 years from leaving school, so I didn't really know what civilian life was like. I had to go down to the Bradford Dole office, which is on Manningham Lane, and it is my presentation still there? It's just said it stopped.
Yeah, no, it's still there.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. So yeah, it was. I'm not seeing my own presentation here. I've lost where it is.
Sorry, Pete, I got thrown out by my internet, and I've put your stuff up. Which slide are you on, mate? Are you on 2 or 3?
Next one, please.
The slide I'm on is slide 7.
The one that I can see. So yeah, as I was laid off, I had to go down to the job centre to add insult to injury. As I put a claim into, obviously, to get the money, they informed me that I hadn't got enough contribution to national insurance. So I had a pregnant missus at home who was due in the September. you know, it were quite difficult times. I were applying for everything you can imagine, cleaning jobs, window cleaning, building site labouring, and it was just an absolute nightmare. You know, we only thing we could get some money towards as rent and things like that. We my missus being, you know, back end of the pregnancy, she was due to go on maternity leave. You know, we found it quite difficult. So for 12 months, I was just in and out of work, working for agencies, working on building sites. I put myself through me CSCS card, so you know, so I could go and work as a labourer on building sites and things like that. You know, it was quite a challenging 12 months for me. And obviously, looking on the internet and things, I seen a job advertised as a school caretaker, and this is where my life with Amey began. So I thought, you know, it's a steady income. It's, you know, I'm guaranteed work all the time. So I applied for the role. And, you know, could you go to the next slide, please, Phil? So as I applied for the role as the school caretaker, this was pretty much the first job interview I've had in my life. You know, I did do a CV workshop prior to leaving the army, which, you know, it was quite a sketchy CV, if you like. You know, but, you know, unfortunate for me, there was enough information on the CV to secure me an interview. My predecessor actually interviewed me 3 times for a caretaking role, which, you know, for me was quite daunting to start with, but I successfully got the role on. Phil, it's not brought the next slide up. So I started with Amey as a school caretaker. You know, I was able to use my practical skills and build the relationships. As I came onto the Bradford contract, then the relationship between the school and the Amey staff on site wasn't particularly good. It was quite a difficult situation where the school was just trying to attract penalties, you know, from Amey. So on the PFI contracts, we've got a set amount of goals and time frames to meet KPIs and the output spec. The school business manager at the time, she pretty much helped write the contract, so she knew all the loopholes and on the, you know, and KPIs. So we were taking quite heavy financial penalties, just, you know, for door handles being loose and things like that. So, you know, I've come into a team being new. The guys and girls on site had been there a lot of years. And, you know, just putting, you know, basic process procedures, routine works, getting people to work together, making sure that, you know, we had an inventory kit on site, so we wasn't taking silly penalties on door handles and things. And that were recognised straight away. And within a couple of months, there was a role as a premises manager. And I was advised to apply for that role. So, you know, I applied for the role, successfully got the position as a premises manager. Again, the site had not had a premises manager on there for quite a while, because unfortunately the gentleman who was there was unwell and unfortunately had to be dismissed from the company due to ill health. One of the caretakers that was in that role alongside me, he actually applied for the same position and didn't get it. So I had a few bridges to build there. The school wasn't following any of the process procedures of the contract and things like that. So I had to pretty much start from scratch, building relationships, making sure that the school are sticking to the contractual requirements. We, you know, some days I'd be leaving to go home, and the head teacher would be saying, "Oh, parents' evening tonight. You know, we've not had anything set up." You know, so, you know, we had to, you know, jump on it and obviously provide what we needed to provide for the event to go ahead. But I had to sit down then with the head teacher, the business manager, and discuss what's going wrong and how we can go about it. And, you know, successfully we managed to get it running as we should do and alongside the contract. I left my first position as premises manager, which was only a small school, looking at occupancy of students, about 1,200 students. And I took on one of the biggest schools we've got, Southfield Grange up in the Bradford area, where there's 2 schools actually in the same building. One of them being a mainstream school, the other being an SEN school for the special educational needs. And I really enjoyed my time. down there because, you know, it was a well-established site. Yes, it was bigger, that I had more staff underneath me, you know, and, you know, it were good because I could obviously guide people and get back to being a people manager, you know, and getting the best out of people that, you know, we used to do in the army when there were difficult, you know, conditions. You still had to keep your troops motivated to achieve, you know, the end goal. And it's pretty same on Civvy Street, you know, but, you know, you just, it's frustrating at times when I first left because people, you know, it wasn't like the army where you had a second in command who was always thinking ahead. So while you were receiving your orders he was doing the battle prep in the background. It wasn't like that. So, you know, I was pretty out on a limb on my own, but, you know, I got there. I became the wellbeing ambassador for the contract as well. I lost my brother to suicide 5 years ago, and that made me kind of think I want to help people. So I took on that role, and, you know, I have had a few cases within the Bradford contract where I have helped people, and I've got them back, you know, back into work in a good state of mind, in a happy place. So, you know, that for me was, you know, a really good thing. When I took on role as premises manager, you know, Amey, you know, provided me lots of opportunities to broaden my skills. I was put on a people managers program where I went down and learned, you know, different ways of managing people. Because obviously in the army, it's a robust management, you know, regime. What we say happens. Obviously, out here on Civvy Street, it doesn't work like that. You need to learn people's colour energies, you know, and this is the different ways we speak to people for them to achieve, you know, what we do as a business and as an individual. You know, I also got put on, you know, courses for pool maintenance. So, you know, there's a lot of courses that, you know, you do get put into, and there's a lot of career opportunities, as you can see, what I've all been through at the moment, what Amey have mapped out for me, and it's been, you know, great. I'm less than 20 minutes from home every night. You know, the Bradford contract is brilliant. We've got 10 schools across 7 sites within the Bradford area. It's a good little contract, and, you know, we're 12 years into a 24-year contract. So, you know, if things are going I've got 12 years still on this contract at home. After I'd, you know, successfully ran that school, we had 2 premises managers that left the business, and we had 2 schools there that needed a manager. I was approached and asked if I could take on the 2 schools. It was a challenge, trying to split myself in half. The schools being 5 mile apart, which wasn't too bad. I successfully, you know, got them schools into place and where they needed to be. And then I was offered the opportunity to apply for the role of operations manager. Successfully took that on, and became part of the senior management team within Bradford, where, you know, it's back to, you know, doing my platoon sergeant stuff, you know, managing people on a bigger level, making sure kit and equipment, contractors are coming on site, you know, we're delivering the output spec. It's you know, it's absolutely brilliant. Within 12 months of being in the role, I'm already the responsible person for the L8 water safety, where I went on a 2-day course, got a city and guilds in water system management. You know, I'm also one of the delivery managers, where me and my colleague, my counterpart, we go out and audit sites, making sure all statutory requirements have been completed, all the certifications on site for audit purposes, and we feed that back every month to Phil and his team and the compliance team to show where we are with statutory compliance. And the end goal for us on the contract is to provide a safe working environment for teaching and learning. I am on a CDM course where, you know, we're going to be taken through CDM requirements and things like that. So, you know, the courses are there. Amey do, you know, invest in us to get us to where we need to be for his end goal. So I think that's pretty much it for me on my journey into Civvy Street. You know, I've gone from, you know, having a cushy job, leaving the army, to been studying, you know, the dole queue in a Bradford Job Centre, where now joining Amey 7 years later, you know, I've been really successful, and, you know, it's been a brilliant journey with Amey, and that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. That was very candid and very honest. Thank you. I think Phil is actually going to compare through this, but is Carl Shadrake, our next speaker, ready?
I sure am. Hopefully you can see me on there.
We can, Carl. That's us.
Fantastic. So, good morning, everybody. Similarly to Peter, actually, we've got a very similar sort of background. So I joined in 2001 as a boy soldier, and I left as a platoon sergeant. Equally, I was in the infantry for my whole career, and obviously the biggest thing I picked up, which I think I offer the civilian world, is the management skills that I picked up along the way. I was in the Grenadier Guards, unlike what Phil said, the Coldstream Guards. So I had a fantastic career, but I slightly differently found myself being medically discharged because of injuries that I'd sustained on operations. I'd been to Bosnia, Iraq a couple of times, Afghanistan a couple of times. My CV is very similar to Pete's, who's just on there. And during the tour of Afghanistan, I was injured. I had a 2-year sort of transitional / rehabilitation period where it's probably more than most people who just sort of terminate their contract and leave into civilian street. But actually, that time frame absolutely gets swallowed up. So although my transition did include hospital appointments, physiotherapy appointments, I was fully aware that that time was going to go quite quickly, and I tried to get myself on as many courses as possible. So with the help of resettlement, which I think when you first join, you don't really think about that, but what an absolutely valuable asset that is. So I managed to get myself on a NEBOSH course quite quickly, which has undoubtedly massively helped my CV and my understanding within the construction industry on the health and safety side of things, which again, you may not appreciate whilst you're in the military, but on the civilian context, is a great course to have under your belt. So when I was first leaving, I thought maybe being on the tools is where I want to be. I've always been a hands-on kind of guy. So I put myself on a 6-week plastering course. I went on to a carpentry course and a kitchen fitting course. And I sort of got to the back end of these sort of month-long courses. And although I quite enjoyed being on the tools, when I sort of sat down and really thought about it, I was like, well, actually, maybe the managerial side of things is probably better for me, having done juniors and seniors. I was leaving with a level 5 leadership and management qualification, which actually is a fantastic thing to have, and you don't appreciate till you're outside of the military just how good that qualification is. So I decided, actually, I'm not going to go on the tools. I'm going to try for a managerial position. So I sort of, once I got out, I found a job that I applied for with the Church of England as a facilities manager, managing their care homes in Surrey. And again, very similar to Pete. I'd only been there for a couple of months, probably 3, and they've pulled everybody in and said, look, we're closing it all down. Everyone's getting made redundant. I hadn't been there for that long, so wasn't entitled to the redundancy. But they did need me to hand over the buildings to the contractors, so they dangled a carrot. I stayed for a little while, or I stayed to the end of that requirement with a small financial gain. What that did mean, though, is I had about 3 months to find a job while still being employed. And actually, it's so much easier to find a job when you're in employment. So definitely start looking for your next job whilst you're in employment, whilst you're in the military, because it's much easier to find it. And I absolutely appreciate that that's not easy, given the time frame that you need to hand in your termination, and then the 12 months that follow on from that. So the resettlement side of things, definitely start it early. You may believe 12 months will be is a lifetime away, but actually it will quickly come up, bite you. You will be out, and you'll be questioning where in the world has that time gone. So another lesson learned is is the managerial skills that you get whilst in the military, rather through promotional courses or whether it's just time spent as a lance corporal, a corporal, a sergeant. You constantly manage people. And as a result, once you come out and you need to manage contractors, you put yourself in an absolutely great space, because a lot of the guys in Civilian Street, they'll promote from the tools and they'll find themselves in a managerial position without necessarily the qualifications, the understanding, all those years of experience. So you're coming out as essentially as a manager, and you already hold that headspace, and you're in the right frame of mind to go in. So moving on from that then, what I would say as well is the value. You need to really appreciate the value of your worth, and understanding what you bring. So I left as a platoon sergeant, and I didn't really appreciate what that was in Civilian Street. Am I a middle manager? Am I Joe Block? Does it count for anything? So there's a lot of jobs out there, especially if you go through the career transition partnership, that will say this operations role, actually this reflects to a staff sergeant within the infantry, or this director's role is for a lieutenant colonel. But actually, right, hopefully I'm still on there, because that just looked like it tried to kick me out.
No, you're back, Cole.
Okay, go. So yeah, you absolutely have to appreciate your worth, and I don't think when I left I fully appreciated what a platoon sergeant brings. And if you are coming out as a lance corporal, or if you're coming out as a major, you will hold so much value to a managerial position at any given level, but absolutely believe in yourself and believe what you're bringing across the Civilian Street is exactly what they need, because it really, really is. Right, so moving on slightly from that, I'm going to touch on CPD, continual personal development. So like I said, when I left, I jumped on a few courses, got health and safety under my belt, but the training can't stop there. And similar to Pete, Amey have put me on courses. So he mentioned the CDM. I was actually on a CDM course just yesterday at RF Northolt. Amey have also put me on my SMSTS, which again is great, operations, health and safety type qualification, which will sit on my CV, and it's absolutely great qual, fully paid for, and puts me in a fantastic position. So I left with level 3 leadership and management from juniors, level 5 leadership and management from senior Brecon, and in December I'm going to be starting my level 7 leadership and management, which Amey are actually supporting me on and giving me some time off work to further my career as CPD. So they are very supportive. There's quite a lot of ex-military guys within Amey. Obviously we have a good bit of banter. So the life in the day of a project manager. So I am on the defence contract, and I work in the southeast, and predominantly my day starts at 8 o'clock, and it is office based. Now, because of coronavirus, I do tend to work more remotely, because a lot of my work can be done via the laptop. So I probably work 2 days in the office, 3 days from home, and that works fine for me. I still have to come to the various sites. I have to issue permits to work. I have to do site inspections, make sure people are working safely. But actually, a large proportion of my work is done by the internet, which I can obviously do from any situation, any location, shall I say. So that's where I find myself. And as the government guidelines change, I'll probably come more into the office. But the great thing about the role that I do is very much big boys rules. That there isn't that overseeing eye constantly looking down on you. You're expected to do a role, and currently I fulfill that. If I find myself falling short, the work is getting a bit too much, then I can put some extra hours in, and it's absolutely fine. So that's where I find myself in the project management role. The jobs that I'm generally doing vary from 5,000 ish, up to 3 million, which the contract will allow us to do. I've been in the PM role now for 18 months. And before that, I was in a facilities management role or a delivery manager role with Amey for about 2 years. And I moved around a handful of sites during that time, and gradually got closer to home. So I'm now 20 minutes away from where I live. So I've got a fantastic commute to my work every day, if I'm not working from home. So the project manager role is exactly where I want to be right now, probably where I want to be for the next few years. But because that continual personal development is there, I'll have hopefully that level 7 leadership and management, which is strategic leadership and management. And then hopefully in a couple of years' time, that'll project my career. And I very much hope to stay with Amey because it is a really good company to work for. So that is pretty much my 10 minutes up. So I will kindly pass you over to Phil.
My sincere apologies for earlier. BT decided that that was obviously the time to, just as we start a webinar, that was the time to cut my internet off. Fortunately, I've got the gadgets to be able to go on to remote things. So if this struggles because of me trying to do too many things at once, please accept my apologies. Mine is a slightly different journey from theirs, but funnily enough, in really similar in terms of some of the lessons that would come out of it. So I left, I was commanding officer of a Royal Engineers unit. I was a Light Joint Force engineer for Herrick 20. I left after 23 years of service in 2015. But because of my pathway, having commanded an armoured squadron and all the rest of it, I then elected to go down the chartered professional engineer route. And very kindly, the Army put me on a 2-year programme, which allowed me to become a chartered civil engineer and a member of the Institution of Civil Engineers, which meant that I had quite a wide background in my military career of FM and major construction projects, which meant that the transition into Civvy Street became that much more logical. I'd echo both Pete and Carl's points about the career transition partnership and all of that training that you get as you leave the Army. I found it really useful and really important. The one bit which I would take away as a massive learn on was that I really could have planned it better. I pressed the button in December 2014, having literally just got back from Afghanistan. Went back out again, in fact, in February, and then actually left in June 2015. And I didn't really plan it as anywhere near as detailed as I should have done. And I would urge you, if you're going on ops, you'd spend a lot of time planning what was going to happen when you arrived. This is about your next stage in your life, so it's worthwhile having a pretty good plan that you can flex from. And during that period, that 6 months, when the jobs didn't, amazingly, not everybody queued up to offer me a job, which I thought was terribly unfair. And in that period, I constantly questioned whether I'd done the right thing, and that sort of sine wave of constantly wondering if you've done the right thing or not just goes on and on and on until you get the job landed, and then you start your first job, and then suddenly you think, no, this I'm in a much happier space now, in a really good space. My transition experience, and I'll come on to it in a couple of slides' time. Everything I applied for online, I didn't get a job at. I just wasn't no responses whatsoever. It was the ones where I networked into it, where I spoke to somebody, I talked to somebody, I got my CV onto the hiring manager's desk myself rather than through a recruiting team. That was the way that I got in, or through a recruiter. So or direct with the manager. So I just, my personal experience. I don't know what it will be for others, but the online applications, because of the nature of our CVs after lengthy periods of military service, don't necessarily tick all the boxes that recruiters are after. So how you write it is critical, and I certainly didn't write mine in the first instance correctly to get past that hurdle. So my first job, a chap called Seamus Kerr, who's a Royal Logistics Corps General, worked for Carillion, and I networked through him into doing a series of interviews with Carillion, and I went in with my chartered civil engineer background to be head of logistics, which wasn't quite what I was expecting. In fact, I determined when I was leaving the army, I'm going to go and I'm not going to get a job with anything to do with engineering or FM or anything like that, because I want to earn loads of money. Apparently, the experience that you have and all of the knowledge that you have does somewhat dictate what jobs people offer you. And they obviously saw the engineering piece coupled with the extraction of stuff from Bastion back in and the rest of Afghanistan. They decided that I would be able to do construction logistics. So I went into Carillion Rail and then worked on the bid for HS2 in partnership with a firm called Eiffage and Kia, who you'll have heard of, and we won a bid, about £1.5 billion contract, which has now gone live, obviously without Carillion, who popped smoke and disappeared. And I went on then, because I was it's a key role, I went on to be head of logistics and security for that joint venture, delivering that work. And when Carillion went pop, I was already in discussions with Amey to go and join them as a regional operations director. And I started down in the south, and I've now got the Midlands, North and Northern Ireland. So I've got 9 contracts, which I'm in charge of which Pete's working on one of them up at Bradford. There's 5 schools contracts, a tertiary college, construction of the PM for the construction of the Police Service of Northern Ireland's new college, a hospital in Birmingham Solihull, and we're just starting on looking after Highways England's offices and depots. So a reasonable portfolio, turning over around about £50 million a year, about 1,000 people working in my area. So a reasonable level of responsibility. And what's the construction FM sector like? Well, I think the main thing is that it is really practical and operational in its nature, and that naturally ties in to all of the skill sets that you will have brought from the military. You're so operationally focused and outputs driven that means that for the construction and facilities management sectors, that sits in operational roles in particular very, very successfully within it. And some of the enabling functions, particularly health and safety, also lend themselves into that way. But whether you're a planner or an operator, health and safety advisor, the construction sector and FM sectors are ideally suited to your background. I think the main difference is the context. We're used to operating in the military within resource constraints and task orientating round that. I think the drivers for those resource constraints in the civvy sector are significantly different and primarily cost based. So as you should all probably know, there's time, cost and quality, and you can't have all 3. You can only have 2 of them. So those resource constraints can affect all 3 of any one of those 3 elements. The other thing which is significantly different is the motivation of the workforce. They're not driven in the same way that soldiers, sailors and airmen are, or Marines, sorry, don't let booties get left out. I've already made a mistake by calling somebody a Coldstreamer when he was a grenadier. I'm not going to make another mistake. The motivation of the workforce. So a lot of the people who are working in this space, it is to get enough money to go to the pub, to pay the mortgage, and go on holiday a year. There's no operational team building, unifying purpose which is on there, and certainly you haven't got the authority to send somebody to jail if they say no. So that is a major difference in that motivation piece. And the other one is the profit and loss aspect of it and the actual need for the business to make money out of what it's doing, rather than just operate within a budget. It's particularly when it's a treasury one and it's unlimited, like on operations. It's not paid as well as the city, sadly. It just if you have expectations of pop star wages, I'm afraid the construction and FM sector is probably not quite where you want to be. And the key skill sets that you bring, both Carl and Pete have mentioned it from their perspective, and it's the same exactly from mine. Your planning ability, the logic that you bring to looking at problems and solving problems, your leadership skills and that dynamism and that ability to motivate others, your understanding of risk and your understanding of where to take risk and not in order to achieve an operational output, your work ethic, that drive and determination, and also the quality and standards that you've just been brought up with and are inculcated in your being. However, I would say that leadership piece is also your greatest weakness. Shouting at civvies doesn't necessarily work, and I'm not sure that modern military leadership necessarily involves shouting, but that focused leadership that you can have within the military doesn't translate into all civilian workplaces. So you have to modify your style and tailor it to fit the right sort of people, bearing in that motivational piece which I spoke about. You have a lack of commercial knowledge, particularly those officers who think that they managed a budget of £2 million because they had a vehicle fleet on it. I mean, the reality is, we all know you didn't actually manage that budget. You just got given some track miles or whatever it might be. So the commercial knowledge we all bring out is weaker. The specific technical expertise for modern civilian practice in the various different spaces, we're lacking on, and that translates into the fact that you haven't got a CV which highlights that commercial knowledge and that technical expertise and the way in it, which leads to that problem which I spoke about earlier about online applications, because quite a lot of those online applications revolve around software and algorithms looking at your CV, and if it hasn't got the right keywords in it, then you just aren't going to get through the course filter. But you can fill in those gaps with with training. So when you're leaving, see what you can possibly get out of your LCAS and all of the other training opportunities in resettlement that you're going to have, but also look at your military experience and try and cross-reference it into civilian terminology. And one of the easy analogies, if you're a sergeant major in a company, battery or whatever, you are responsible for standards and quality. So you're a quality manager. And perhaps you can translate that if you're tailoring your CV to a specific role, so that you pick up some of those keywords and demonstrate that. Be very aware of being overconfident, that military experience translates directly into Civvy Street. It doesn't make you an expert. It just means that you have some really strong skill sets that can be transferred across into Civvy Street. So just be careful of that. But equally, don't undersell yourself. And Carl said it, and Pete said it. You're really, really good at your job, and if you've achieved any rank within the military, you've gone through an extraordinary level of selection in order to get to that pace, and then you've had a vast amount of training to get you into that space, and that's really powerful. And you've just got to articulate that in such a way that others can see it. So here's Phil's top tips. Like all advice, you should ignore it or take it very carefully and balance it against other people's. But I was interested listening to Pete and Carl that so much of what I've said seems to chime with what they've said, and when I see what the recruiters have put on their slides, it also seems to chime. So hopefully this is relatively uniform. Before you apply for a job, make sure it's the right one for you. You've got a vast amount of choice in front of you. Pick something that you want to do. You're going to be spending a lot of time doing it, and also consider the route you're going to get into that. Are you going to be self-employed, set yourself up and do your own thing, which is the most risky but possibly the most rewarding? Are you going to go through an agency, work as a consultant, or are you going to go for the directly employed PAYE route that we've taken? Look at your courses, fill in your experience gap with qualifications, and the biggest thing I can say is network. And this is the sort of thing which you can do. There's the VETS program, Billforce do things, LinkedIn do things, recruiting events and reaching out to colleagues and people you've never met before. There's no skill to networking. I know when I came out, I thought that networking was I could go on a course in networking and learn how to do it. It's talking to people. And I think the best bon mot piece of advice I heard was somebody said, every single conversation you have is a job interview. You just might not realize it at the time. So when you talk to somebody in business, whether it's a friend, whether it's a friend of a friend, whether it's out in the pub or not so much these days, or wherever it is, just think about the impression that you're giving and where you can what that might land for you. And then when you apply, I'm just conscious of time, I'm taking up too long, my apologies. Certainly for management positions, most managers have between a 1 and 3 month notice period. So therefore, when we're recruiting, we're expecting between 1 and 3 months to recruit into that position. So if you've got 9 months until you're out of the army, applying for a job is not going to land you it. It's just too far out. And the CV is the one that gets you to the interview. So make sure the CV is really good. If you've got spelling errors or it doesn't pick up, isn't tailored to the specific role you're applying for, it isn't going to work. My personal experience is generic CVs are mixed. That they're a basis to apply a specific CV for a job. You need to be realistic about your role and package. You're not going to walk into the senior executive position straight away. You're going to have to work your way up, and it's really good to see both Carl and Pete. They've worked their way into the positions they're in at the moment, which are senior positions, and they're doing really well, and they've worked up to it. It is possible to get really high up really relatively quickly because you are so good at your jobs. Have that real and relevant experience, and be flexible. Like when I was offered a job in logistics, that wasn't quite what I was intending, but I was pretty keen to take a job, and that landed me in, and then I've been able to launch from that because that gives you the commercial experience to go on to the next one. When you go to interview, research it. You wouldn't go into operations without having done all of that intelligence gathering. And there's so much you can do with modern, with the internet and all the rest of it to find out about the organization you're wanting to join, who's interviewing you, exactly what the role is like. And Carl said it specifically. You've got to add value. We're in. How are you better than the other person wanting to be employed for the job? We're trying to make a profit, so how are you going to help do that? And just be prepared to say, listen, I can do this better, I'm really good at this, and sell yourself within the caveat of not bluffing, because you'll get caught out. Practice interview technique. How you come across in interview is really important, and I've interviewed lots of people now. And it is fascinating seeing the difference between people. And with your confidence and your knowledge, bit of practice, you should come across really well in an interview. And have a think about what questions you're going to be asked. Most interviews have a set of questions that they're going to ask, the same questions to every candidate, and take it from there as a framework so that we can score it, so that we can demonstrate we've been fair and equitable. Well, try and have a guess what those questions might be for the role that you're applying for, and prepare yourself mentally for some answers to answer them. And just remember that the person who's interviewing you, they've got a gap, and that gap's costing them money, so they want to fill it. So the idea is you're there to fill it, and you've just got to convince them that you're the best person for it, which puts you a good set of strength in your hands. And the final one is negotiating the package. And it goes back to that being realistic about what you might get. Look at the whole package. There are lots of ways of finding out roughly what you think it's going to be by asking former military colleagues, people looking at Glassdoor, which is always a good one, just to see what the roles are like and what the company's like you're going to look for. And do bear in mind it's a whole package, not just a base salary. Look at medical, look at car, look at other benefits that might come, and be reasonable. You might have to take a backward slide slightly in order to get yourself further up. But do bear in mind as well that first job, the next time you go, they will ask you what you're currently on. And so that will set the baseline for your second and third roles. And so your first role is what sets that baseline. Whoever's interviewing will have a budget for the job. They'll have a salary range that they can afford to pay somebody for that job. And your idea is to try and get towards the top end of that without scaring them off. So they want best value. You want to get as much as you can. It's a negotiation. So there is space without any shadow of a doubt to negotiate it. I'm going to hand over now. That's enough of me, and pass it over to the people that you really get proper benefit from, because that's Jolene and Vicky. Jolene, Vicky.
Hi, sorry,
hello, sorry, I was on. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mute myself. Sorry, hello everybody. I'll kick off. My name's Jo, and obviously I just want to say thanks to Carl, Peter, and Phil. Really great stuff to obviously hear your journey, which is always great to hear. So basically, I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me. Make sure I've got it on the right page. Okay, so obviously we lost Phil a little bit at the start, but really just a quick slide about Amey, a little bit about what we do, because you being one of 64 million people, you pretty much use one of our services every day. You might not know it, but you do. So I won't go into too much detail, but Phil, Peter, Carl, you've touched upon, how we try and support the armed forces and how we've promised to recognise skills and experience of all service leavers, veterans, and how we, try and encourage and support your future employment, and hopefully that would be with us. So we work obviously closely with Build Force and CTP, and also the Forces family. And really, obviously, just going back to what Phil was saying, essential courses of, what you might want to do is definitely the NEBOSH. Health and safety is absolutely one of the top ones. Again, but going back to what Carl was saying, whilst in the army, start looking. It really is true. And again, also being realistic and flexible about salary packages and that side of things, really. Over to you, Vicky.
So thanks everybody. So I think Jolene looks after the recruitment for our defence and secure infrastructure place. I look after transport infrastructure, and I suppose kind of my advice would be a little bit like what Phil, Peter and Carl have said, and there is a lot of appetite across the business, certainly for transport and infrastructure, for ex-service people to come on board based on the skill set and the skills that you have to provide to the team and to Amey as a whole. In terms of the stretch of what we look after, so we have a wide remit, whether that be geography, so across, national, across the whole of the UK and Ireland, as well as in terms of skill set. So when we talk a little bit about project management, in some of the other business units, like for Joe's area, for example, in facilities management and projects, there's a lot of recruitment on sites. From myself, so for my team, we cover transport, utilities, and waste treatment across the whole of the business. Our transport infrastructure includes rail as well. So I think from my point of view, I would say have an open mind in terms of the other opportunities that are out there. In terms of the type of things that you can kind of bring to Amey would be, exactly what Phil was saying about leadership and work ethic, and also kind of standards that you would bring into there. So in terms of a little bit about what I would recommend, definitely networking. And definitely, you know, when Phil was talking about the looking at your CV and making sure that it's specific for each of the roles. Things I find from looking through CVs is a lot of people will use the same CV for each role, and they're absolutely missing a trick, because if I have a project manager in transport infrastructure, whilst it might not be a construction based one, it may be something that's kind of looking after a specific team, then kind of making sure that that's emphasized on your CV. Again, LinkedIn is great to be a part of. As a signpost, I would absolutely recommend linking in with Joe and myself, who can signpost you to the rest of the team throughout Amey. In terms of looking back at the slide, so potential CV shortcomings. So again, lack of commercial experience, lack of specialist knowledge or qualifications. But as I say, none of them are showstoppers. There's a lot of roles out there, and as you can kind of hear, both from Peter and Carl's, you know, transition into Civvy Street, then it will be a case of having an open mind about the role. I've worked myself for Amey for 18 months, and I can honestly kind of just, you know, emphasize what the guys have said about investors in people. The training that we have at Amey to support our employees is outstanding, and there's a lot of kind of emphasis on leadership, career path frameworks, to making sure that we do demonstrate that we are, you know, providing that training to people. So, you know, in terms of kind of, as I say, you know, just to kind of finalise from me, my absolute giveaways would be link in with Joe and I, ask us questions if you see roles, you know, would you think that my type of skill set as experience is good for this particular role? We share everything in terms of the roles that we have across LinkedIn. As Phil alluded to a little bit earlier about new contracts that we're getting all the time. Again, in transport infrastructure, we've had 3 in the last 6 months. Again, that kind of cover the locations, and we put all that on our LinkedIn pages and on our website. We have up on the slides now just a bit of a link to our Amey's career site. Have a good look around there, have a look at the different business units that we have and that we look after, and then utilise myself and Joe as a bit of a signpost for help. So, Joe, I don't know whether you want to add anything else from your point of view, but yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. No, I mean, I think we are now on to questions. If anyone else wants to ask any questions, or anyone else has got anything to say, Phil or Carl or anyone.
That's brilliant. Thank you. You might want to use the raise your hand if you have a question, or just please feel free to put your camera on and ask a question direct. I'll kick off. I've got a list of questions here that I wrote down. Phil had mentioned a few things around not using a recruiter going straight to the hiring manager, networking to get roles. Can I ask Peter and Carl, just at that point when you're applying for roles, what was the kind of golden nugget for them? What did they do different, or in that instance, that secured them the role with Amey, for example, Peter? Your mute's on. Yeah, that's it. Perfect.
Mine was pretty much same as Phil's. I was putting my CV out there. I was applying for lots of things, and fortunately for me, Amey was the only people that came back to me that offered me an interview. So I think I kind of fell on my feet. Obviously, it is tailoring your CV to the job spec and what's on the advertisement as well. Obviously working on building sites and things like that as a labourer and things, I picked up basic skills, plasterboarding, you know, basic plastering, taping and jointing, etc., which, you know, as a caretaker, they are, you know, key skills that we do require, because these schools do get damaged, unfortunately, by students. So I think that for me, you know, help me out is tailoring your CV to what the job spec says.
And Carl, any advice at that point? I think you're mute side as well, Carl.
Right, hopefully that's better.
Sorry, that's it.
No, thanks for letting me know. For me, it was different. So as I was being made redundant, but I had a 3-month window, I managed to apply for 6 separate jobs, one of which was with Amey, but others with Skanska and many of the large companies. I interviewed for all 6, and I got offered 5 out of the 6 jobs. And I opted to go for the Amey role solely because the package was better, and Phil mentioned it earlier on. So that the base salary was kind of where I wanted to be at, but actually there was a vehicle that was came as part of the package. There's pension benefits, which, you know, I'm sure I'll reap the rewards in when I'm 70 or 80, whenever the retirement age changes by the time it comes to my pension. But you know, it's the overall package that sold it for me, and the job role that was being offered. But I was in a great position where I had the choice. It was back in my hands, and I opted to go for the facilities management role.
Okay, fantastic.